Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's continuing word study of 1 Corinthians. And today we will be looking at chapters 13 and 14. But first, as always, let's bow our hearts and pitch our tents with our beloved Elohim. Dear beloved Abba Father, oh Abba, we come before you to worship you, to praise you, and to thank you, Father, for our time with you this day in your word. Thanking you, Father, for opening our eyes, our ears, and our hearts, causing us to see, to hear, and to understand the greater depths and mysteries and the proper understanding of what your word means to deliver to us. As we give this day, Abba, to you, your beloved Yachid, our Adon, Yeshua, and your indwelling Ruach HaKodesh, praying in Yeshua's Kodesh name, Yahweh, Yahweh, our Elohim, Yahweh Echad. Amen. If I can speak in the tongues or languages of men, or even of malachim, angels, but do not have love, I am truly nothing but a noisy gong, a clanging cymbal. Note, if I do not have love, that is to say, if I do not have Yahweh. Look at 1 John, Yochanan, chapter 4, verse 8. Those who do not love have not become acquainted with Yahweh. They do not know him, and they never have known him, for Yahweh is love. Now, mind you, my friends, I even heard it again this week. There are people out there that take this Yahweh is love too far, where they'll say, the Father would never hurt anybody. He wouldn't kill anybody. He wouldn't cause anybody to be killed because God is love, quote unquote. Wrong. Yahweh says himself in his word that he created evil. And there are times in the record of his word where he killed hundreds of thousands in one night. So, yes, Yahweh is love, and anyone who has no love in their heart doesn't know Yahweh, and they never did, because he is love, and without him no one can know love. But that does not mean that he is nothing but love. In other words, if I do not have a profound thoughtfulness and an unselfish concern for other believers, regardless of their circumstances or station in life, I am truly nothing but a noisy gong, a clanging cymbal. Continuing. And if I am given prophetic powers, if I am given the gift of interpreting the divine will and purpose of Elohim and understand all the secret truths and mysteries, if I possess all knowledge, and if my belief is firm and strong enough that I can remove mountains, but have not Elohim's love in me, I am nothing. Even if I dole out all that I have to the poor in providing food, even if I surrender my body to be burned in order that I may boast as a martyr, but have not Elohim's love in me, I gain nothing. Note, Chavarim, take these next 5 verses, verses 4 through 8, and meditate on them by first replacing the word love, wherever you see it, with Yeshua. Then go back and do it all again, but this time replace the word love with your own name and see what happens. These are the verses. Continuing. Love endures long. It is patient and kind. Love is never envious. It never boils over with jealousy. It is not boastful or vainglorious. It does not display itself proudly. It is not conceited, arrogant, or inflated with pride. It is not rude and does not act unbecomingly. Elohim's love in us does not insist on getting its own way because it is not self-seeking. It is not touchy or fretful or resentful. It pays no attention to the evil done to it. It does not rejoice over injustice and unrighteousness, but rejoices when right and truth prevail. Love bears up under anything and everything that comes. It is ever ready to believe the best of every person. It is full of hope under all circumstances, and it endures everything without weakening. Love never fails. It never fades out. It never becomes obsolete. And it never comes to an end. As for nevuot, prophecies, they will be fulfilled and pass away. As for tongues, they will cease to be. As for knowledge, it will pass away. It will lose its value and be superseded by truth. For our knowledge is fragmentary. It is incomplete and imperfect, and we prophesy in fragments, incomplete and imperfect. But when that which is complete and perfect comes, the incomplete and imperfect will vanish away. It will become antiquated, void, and superseded. Note, has knowledge passed away? No, it has certainly not. Look at Acts, Maaseh, chapter 2, verse 17. Look at Revelation, Chazon, chapter 10, verse 4. When that which is complete and perfect comes, does not refer to the Father's Word, the book we call the Bible, which we are studying. Chavarim, there are many people out there who will tell you that the gifts of the Ruach no longer exist. These are people who are promoting a doctrine of demons that began in the early 1900s, saying that because the Bible has been completed, that's, the thing that's perfect and it has come. And so since the Bible's been completed, the gifts of the Ruach no longer exist and are now done away with. Don't you believe it? When that which is complete and perfect comes is, of course, talking about the second coming of Yeshua. Yeshua HaMashiach, coming at the end of the 7-year tribulation. That makes sense. Anything else does not. Continuing. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child. But now that I've become a man, I am done with childish ways and have put them aside. For now, we are looking in a hazy mirror that gives only a dim, blurred reflection of reality. But then, when perfection comes, we will see true reality. We will see face to face, person to person, presence to presence. For now, we know in part only, but then we will know and understand fully and clearly, even in the very same manner as we have been fully and clearly known by Elohim. And so, now, faith being washed by and growing in Yahweh's word. Hope, joyful and confident expectation of eternal salvation. And love, true affection for Elohim and man, growing out of Elohim's love for and in us. These three remain, but the greatest of these is love. Eagerly pursue and seek to acquire this love, and earnestly desire and cultivate the gifts of the Ruach, especially that you may navah, prophesy, interpreting the divine will and purpose of Elohim through inspired preaching and teaching. Note, Shaul is saying, Chavarim, that all gifts are worthy and necessary, but that we should give the gift of prophecy the highest priority. In Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verse 15, Devarim, we read, Yahweh your Elohim will raise up for you a Navi, a prophet, from the midst of your brothers like me, meaning Moshe, and to him you will listen. The Navi who is promised here was preeminently Yeshua Chavari. He alone was like unto Moshe in his intercessional character, in the particular excellence of his ministry, in the number, variety, and magnitude of his miracles, in his close and familiar communion with Abba, Father Yahweh, and in his being the author of a new dispensation of worship. This prophecy was fulfilled 1,500 years later and was expressly applied to Yeshua by Kepha, Peter, in Maaseh, Acts, chapter 3, verses 22 and 23, and also by Stephanos, Stephen, in Maaseh, Acts, chapter 7, verse 37. Continuing, for one who speaks in an unknown tongue speaks not to men, but to Elohim. For no one understands or catches his meaning, because in the Ruach HaKodesh he utters secret truths and hidden things that are not obvious to the average understanding. But, on the other hand, the one who navah, the one who prophesies, he who interprets the divine will and purpose through inspired preaching and teaching, speaks to all, to build them up, promoting their spiritual growth, to encourage them, and to comfort and console them. He who speaks in a strange tongue edifies and improves himself. But he who navah, he who prophesies, he who interprets the divine will and purpose of Elohim, teaching with inspiration, edifies and improves the called out ones, the Kodeshim. Note, Shaul is obviously saying that speaking in unknown tongues is a personal thing, Chavarim. Continuing, now I wish that you might all speak in unknown tongues, but more especially, I want you to navah, that is to prophesy, and that is to preach and interpret the divine will and purpose of Elohim. He who prophesies, he who is inspired to preach and teach, is more useful and more important than he who speaks in unknown tongues, unless he interprets what he says, so that the called out ones may be edified and receive good from it. Note, if anyone ever speaks in an unknown tongue in any assembly of the called out ones, Chavarim, someone must give an interpretation of what was spoken, or the speaking in tongues was and or is not inspired of Elohim. Continuing. Now, brothers, if I come to you speaking in unknown tongues, how will I make it to your advantage unless I speak to you either by revelation or with knowledge or through nevuah, prophecy, or by teaching? And even lifeless ones making sounds with musical instruments such as a flute or a harp, if they do not give distinct notes, how will anyone who is listening know or understand what's being played? And if the war bugle gives an uncertain call, who will prepare for battle? And that is just how it is with you. If you speak words that are unintelligible, how will anyone understand what you're saying? You will be talking into empty space. There are undoubtedly so very many kinds of voices and sounds in the world, and none of them are without significance. They all have their own forms of expression and meaning. Therefore, if I do not know the inherent power and significance of another person's language, I will seem to be a rude and ignorant person to the one who speaks it, just as the one who speaks it would seem to be a rude and ignorant person from my point of view. And so it is with you. Since you are so ambitious to possess spiritual gifts, concentrate on striving to excel and to abound in them in ways that will build up the called out ones. Therefore, the person who speaks in an unknown tongue should pray for the power to also interpret and explain what he says. Because if I pray in an unknown tongue, my spirit prays, but my understanding bears no fruit and helps no one. So then, what am I to do? I will pray through Yahweh's indwelling Ruach HaKodesh, and I will also pray intelligently with my mind and with my understanding. I will sing with my spirit through the indwelling Ruach HaKodesh, and I will also sing intelligently with my mind and with my understanding. Otherwise, if you barach, if you bless, and give thanks with the Ruach, how can anyone who is an outsider, or how can anyone who is not gifted with interpreting unknown tongues, say Amen to your thanksgiving, since he does not know what you're saying? To be sure, you may give thanks honorably, but the bystander is not edified, it does him no good. I thank my Elohim that I speak in strange tongues more than all of you put together. Nevertheless, in public worship, I would rather say 5 words with my understanding that I might teach others than 10,000 words in a strange tongue. Brothers, do not be like children, immature in your thinking. Continue to be children in matters of evil, but in your understanding be mature adults. In the Torah it is written, with men of strange tongues and other lips I will speak to this people, and not even then will they listen to me, says Yahweh. So then, unknown tongues are for supernatural signs and wonders, not for believers, but for unbelievers. While Navah, prophecy, that is, inspired preaching and teaching, which expresses the divine will and purpose of Elohim, is not for unbelievers, but for believers. Note, Shaul is pointing to Isaiah, Yeshayahu, chapter 28, verses 11 and 12 here, Chavarim, which reads, Yahweh will teach the rebels in a more humiliating way. By men with stammering lips and another tongue will he speak to this people and teach them his lessons, says Isaiah. And to these complaining Jews, Yahweh said, this is the true test which you will give to the weary. And this is the true resting place. But they would not listen to Yahweh's teaching. In other words, Chavarim, unbelievers are not going to listen. Period. Should I go get Mr. Brick? We'll let him rest out on the porch. Continuing. Therefore, if all the called out ones come together, with all of you speaking in unknown tongues, and there come those who are unlearned or unbelievers, will they not say that you are all insane? But if all navah, if all prophesy, and an unbeliever or untaught outsider comes in, he is reproved and convicted and convinced by all. His defects and needs are examined. He is called to account by all. And so the secrets of his heart are laid bare, and falling on his face, he will worship Elohim, declaring that Elohim is truly among you. Note, what follows, Chavarim, describes the ideal fellowship. Continuing. What then, brothers, is the right course? When you meet together, each one has a tehillah, a psalm, a teaching, an utterance in a strange tongue, or an interpretation of it. Each one has a revelation. But let everything be done in a way that is edifying, uplifting, and for the good of all. If some speak in an unknown tongue, let the number be limited to 2, or at the most 3, each in turn, with one interpreting and explaining what is said. But if there is no one to do the interpreting, let each of them keep still and speak only to himself and to Elohim. Let 2 or 3 Nevi'im, prophets, speak, while the rest pay attention, weighing and discerning what is being said. And if an inspired revelation comes to another who is sitting by, then let the first one be silent, for in this way you can give testimony. You can navah, prophesy, and thus interpret the divine will and purpose of Elohim one by one, so that all may be instructed and all may be stimulated and encouraged, because the spirits of the Nevi'im are subject to the Nevi'im. They are subject to being silenced as may be necessary. Because Elohim is not the author of confusion and disorder, but of peace and order, as is the practice in all the assemblies of the Kodeshim. Let your women be silent in your assemblies, for they are not authorized to speak, but should take a secondary and subordinate place, just as the Torah says. And if there's anything they want to learn, they should ask their own husbands at home, for it is dishonorable for a woman to exercise authority over men by speaking in an assembly. Note, Chavarim, Shaul is referring to married women, wives of believing husbands here. Take a look at Ephesians, FCM, chapter 5, verse 22. Look at Colossians, Colosseum, chapter 3, verse 18. And look at Titus, chapter 2, verse 4 and 5. And look at 1 Peter, Kepha, chapter 3, verse 1 and chapter 3, verse 5. We see no comments about unmarried women. They most likely are to abide by the prohibition against speaking out in assemblies as well, and should ask questions outside the service. Also, Chavarim, it's important to realize on top of that that women at that time were uneducated. And, this is often still the case even today in certain areas of the Middle East. But back then, women sat on one side of the synagogue, and they would lean across the aisles asking their husbands questions. Pandemonium would ensue, and that is what Shaul is addressing here. You don't want that kind of confusion going on. Continuing. What? Did the word of Yahweh originate with you? Or has it reached only you? If anyone thinks and claims that he is a Navi, or that he has any other spiritual endowment, let him understand that what I am writing to you is a command of the Adon. And if any man does not recognize that these are commands of the Adon, he will not be recognized by the Adon. So, to conclude, my brothers, earnestly desire and set your hearts to Navah, to prophesy, and do not forbid or hinder speaking in unknown tongues. Let all things be done with decency and in orderly fashion. Let's bow our hearts. Oh, Abba, Father, we praise you. We thank you, Father, for our time with you this day. We thank you, Abba, for recognizing the questions we each have in our own hearts, whether we voice them or not. We thank you for recognizing them and bringing answers to us in ways that we will not miss. We thank you, Abba, and as always, we give this day and every day to you, your beloved Yachid, our Adon Yeshua, and your indwelling Ruach HaKodesh, your indwelling presence. In Yeshua's Kodesh name, Yahuwah, Yahweh, our Elohim, Yahweh Echad. Amen. That's our study for this week, my friends. As always, I hope and I pray that these studies are a constant and continual berachah to you and to yours. Abba willing, I'll see you here again next week. Until then, shalom, chavarim.
Now 2,000 years have gone by, it's another working day. Some would rather let it lie, but the question still remains.